In the hallway after it was over, Marisol Vega stopped with one hand on her purse strap and said, "Thank you for making the order big enough to stop her and small enough to leave her a way back." Then she nodded once like she had set something down that had been heavy for a long time. "I have been carrying that with me. This is the case it came from. The sorrow in it started on a wet road in Houston. The grace in it arrived later, and from a place I did not expect. Before I keep going, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a room where someone asked for accountability without asking for cruelty too? I mean, really asked for both things to stay in the room at once. Subscribe. Because that is the room I am about to take you into, and I want you here when those two things finally meet." When Marisol first came into my courtroom, she did not look around to see who was watching her. She folded her coat across the back of her chair with slow, steady hands, then sat down very straight, as if her spine had made an agreement with itself before she walked in. During the hearing, she took notes only when Emma spoke, and at one point during a short break, she slid a tissue box to the edge of counsel table without saying a word. That told me more than any summary ever could. When Emma Lynch came in, I saw the damage she had caused before I saw the woman herself, because that is what a file does to you if you are not careful. Then she bent to pick up a photograph an older woman in the gallery had dropped, handed it back with both hands, and went right back to standing where the deputy had placed her. It was a small thing. It had nothing to do with the charge. It had everything to do with the fact that I had to see her whole and still rule clearly. The sorrow current in this case began on November 4, 2024 at 11:17 p.m. At the intersection of Westheimer Road and Fondren Road in Houston. Rain had just let up. The road was slick. Marisol Vega was driving home in a gray Honda CR-V with her 12-year-old daughter Sophia after picking up an inhaler refill from a late pharmacy. Emma Lynch came through that light in a white Jeep Cherokee going fast enough that the crash report measured 41 feet of braking after impact. She clipped the rear quarter of Marisol's car, shoved it sideways, and sent both vehicles into the turn lane. The first officer on scene said Emma got out unsteady, pointed at the road and said, "I was traveling, not driving, and I do not answer commercial questions." That line made it into the body camera footage and into the transcript later, but that was not the part that stayed with me first. What stayed with me first was what happened right after. Marisol was holding the side of her neck. Sophia was crying in the back seat. Emma looked toward that car and said, "Is the little girl okay?" That was not enough to undo anything. It still belonged in the story. By the time the case reached me, I had the police report, the body camera footage, the crash photographs, the bond orders, the portable breath monitor logs, the pretrial supervision notes, and the motion the defense filed after the missed tests began to stack up. The file itself was thick in a way misdemeanor files are not supposed to get thick. When I opened it, the first page was simple and the rest of it was not. There is one thing most people do not know about a bond condition, so let me say it plainly. A bond condition is not the punishment. It is the set of rules I put in place while the case is still alive, so that the public is safer and the defendant has a fair chance to stay out of jail while we wait. When I order a person not to drink, not to drive, or to blow into a device 3 times a day, I am not making a speech. I am building guardrails. Emma had been given those guardrails on December 3, 2024. No alcohol, no illegal drugs, a portable alcohol testing device 3 times a day, clear camera view, timely sample. On January 10, 2025 at 10:38 p.m., the device recorded a .03 reading, and the report said she had blown into it in the dark so her face could not be seen. By February 3, 2025, there were 15 skipped or failed tests logged against her bond. If you are still with me, you have probably gone quiet. Whatever was around you when this started has probably pulled back a little. Subscribe. That kind of attention matters to me, and this story has not yet reached the place where it becomes what it really is. Subscribe and turn on notifications. From the bench, I see entrances in a way most people in the room do not. I see what people look at first. I see what they refuse to look at. Marisol walked in and let her eyes rest for 1 second on the railing in front of her before she sat down, as if she needed one solid thing to fix herself to. Emma walked in and looked first at the ceiling camera, then at the floor. One was bracing, One was measuring. I carried both of them at once. The first piece of evidence that established the full weight of the sorrow current was a photograph taken from the passenger side of Marisol's car. The cracked glass had bowed inward in a white spiderweb pattern. On the front seat there was a paper pharmacy bag. On the floorboard there was a child's sneaker and a loose inhaler cap. Nothing in that picture was dramatic. It was worse than that. It was ordinary life interrupted in the middle of itself. Then the state played a short clip from the body camera. Marisol was standing in the rain, one hand on the open car door, trying to answer questions while also turning back every few seconds to tell Sophia she was safe. At one point, Sophia said from the back seat, "Mom, I was looking right at the red light." I had to stop writing for a moment after that. Some sentences do not need help carrying weight. The grace current began for me 3 weeks later, and it did not begin with Emma. It began with a letter Marisol wrote to the court before the first review setting. It was 1 page, blue ink, careful handwriting. She did not ask me to destroy Emma. She wrote, "I need the court to make her stop lying before somebody gets hurt worse." That sentence earned its place in the case. It offered no softness that had not been paid for. There was one reaction in the room during that part of the evidence I still remember with exact clarity. Marisol's husband reached for her hand, and she let him take it for 1 second, then pulled free so she could keep writing. She was accepting help and refusing to disappear inside it. That is a kind of strength I have seen before. It always quiets a room. The sorrow current kept moving. The portable breath device logs came in next. Missed morning test, missed afternoon test, missed late night test, another missed test, another one. Then the January 10th entry with the Neuro 3 reading and the notation that she blew in the dark. 15 skipped or failed tests is not confusion. It is a pattern, and patterns are what judges are trained to notice before they become funerals. But the grace current moved too. The defense offered a treatment intake note from a counselor Emma had met after the second violation report came in. In it, the counselor had written that when asked why she finally scheduled the appointment, Emma said, "My son should not know what a portable breath machine is." That line belonged nowhere near an excuse. It belonged near the truth. Then came the point where the two rivers stopped running beside each other and entered the same water. Marisol took the stand. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She said, "I do not want her ruined. I want her reliable." I wrote it down. That was the first piece of evidence in the whole case that carried both currents at once. Sorrow was in it. Grace was in it. Neither one had pushed the other out. Here is what I am offering you. The rest of this story told exactly the way I lived it, from the bench, with nothing cleaned up early and nothing turned simple because simple is easier. Subscribe if that is what you want. I will keep going. The state's argument was direct. Emma had been arrested for driving while intoxicated. She had been given the chance to remain free while the case moved. She had been told in plain language what the rules were. She had then skipped or failed the alcohol tests 15 times, and once she tried to give a sample in the dark so the camera could not verify who was blowing. The prosecutor said, "Judge, the court gave structure and she treated it like a suggestion." That line belonged to the sorrow current. The defense argued something narrower and, to my mind, more honest than a lot of defenses I hear. Counsel said the machine data needed real scrutiny, that a vendor report could not become holy just because it was printed out, and that no one should lose liberty based on a device nobody in the courtroom could explain from the inside out. That was a proper legal argument. It deserved to be heard carefully. The law is not a shortcut machine. Then defense counsel said something I did not expect. He looked at me, then at Emma, and said, "Judge, she has been wrong in almost every direction a person can be wrong, but she is not unreachable." That sentence did not erase the logs or the crash or the fear in Sophia's voice. It did belong to the grace current. I remember that because I felt sorrow for what Marisol had lived through and mercy toward Emma at the same time. What the defense could not resolve was the pattern. 1 missed test can be accident. 2 can still be confusion. 15 with a recorded Notter 03 and a dark camera sample is a person telling the court over and over that rules only count when they feel convenient. No argument about software ever touched that part cleanly. The sorrow current was too full by then. Emma did testify, not much, no long speech, no sudden turn into wisdom, but there were 3 lines from her I still remember. The first belonged to the part of her that was still hiding. She said, "There is no injured party if nobody died." When she said that, I saw Marisol's jaw lock for half a second. I saw Sophia's grandmother close her eyes. Harm does not wait for a funeral to become real. The second line belonged to the grace current, though it arrived roughly. Emma said, "I know how stupid this sounds, but I kept thinking if I could outsmart the machine, I would not have to tell my son the truth." That was not polished. It was not designed to help her. It was the first time she had said something that sounded less like a theory she borrowed and more like a fact she was finally touching. Then she said the sentence I wrote down. She said, "I kept trying to beat a machine because I did not want to admit I was the problem." I wrote it down. I looked at it for a long time. Both things I was feeling were in that one sentence. I did not expect that. There is a memory from my own life that sat next to this case the whole time. I have never had a clean reason for why certain memories come forward when they do. Years ago, before I was on the bench, I sat in a hospital cafeteria with my mother after my younger cousin broke his leg and crushed his shoulder in a wreck caused by a drunk driver. My mother was stirring coffee she had already stopped drinking. Across from us, my aunt was filling out insurance papers with swollen eyes and very neat handwriting. Loss was there. So was the strange work of continuing. Nobody named either one. Both were present. I just realized, saying that out loud, that I had never placed that memory beside this case in words before today. Subscribe. That realization is going to matter in a few minutes, and I would like you here when it does. Subscribe now. By the time I reached the ruling phase, I was no longer deciding between hard and soft. I was deciding whether I had enough courage to hold both things in one order without letting either one go thin. Judges are supposed to be measured, that is true. But measurement is not numbness. It is feeling the full weight and still keeping your hands steady. Before I announced the sentence, I looked down at the file once more. Emma was standing with both hands clasped in front of her, rubbing the edge of one thumbnail with the pad of her thumb. Marisol had turned slightly sideways in her chair, not away from Emma but not fully toward her either. My own hands were flat on the bench. I had decided carefully. I had decided knowing that this ruling had to hold the weight of what was lost and also leave room for what might still happen. Those two things do not always fit in the same ruling. In this case, they did. I had made sure they did. I found that Emma had violated the conditions of her bond. I found the violations were repeated, knowing, and serious. I found that leaving things as they were would be a lie in a robe. Then I sentenced her. I said, "I am ordering you to serve 30 days in the Harris County Jail, with credit for 3 days already served." I said it slowly. I am doing that because 15 skipped or failed tests are not a misunderstanding. They are 15 refusals to let this court know whether you were safe. Jail is not going to heal Marisol Vega's neck or erase what Sophia heard in that car. It is going to mark in a way you cannot talk around that this was real. I said, "I'm also ordering you to pay $2,486 in restitution to Marisol Vega for the insurance deductible, the replacement child seat, and the 2 physical therapy bills that were not covered." Then I added a $750 fine to the Harris County DWI Victim Education Fund. "That money has a job," I told her. "Part of it repairs what your choices damaged. Part of it goes toward the people who sit with families after nights like the one you caused." I said, "I am ordering 180 hours of community service, and 120 of those hours will be completed at Ben Taub Hospital's Trauma Patient Transport Desk or another approved hospital support site." I explained why. "You will spend time helping move people whose bodies and lives have been interrupted, not because service is pretty, because I want the part of you that kept life small and private to stand where consequences pass by in wheelchairs." I said, "I am ordering 18 months of supervised probation with an ignition interlock on every vehicle you drive, a substance use treatment program within 14 days, weekly counseling for 6 months, and then whatever step-down care your counselor recommends after that." I told her the reason in plain language. The evidence showed me alcohol is not your only problem. Your other problem is that when shame shows up, you look for a trick. Treatment is where I expect that habit to end. Then I gave the part of the sentence that mattered most to me. I said, I am ordering you to appear in this court in person once each month for the next 6 months. Your sister Claire Lynch will attend the first 3 review hearings with you. You will write 1 letter to Marisol Vega, but it will not be sent unless she asks to receive it, and you will attend a victim impact panel and sit through every minute of it. Then I told her why. Accountability that happens alone can turn into self-pity. Accountability that happens in the presence of other people has a better chance of becoming change. And there was one more thing. I said, if you complete 12 straight months with no missed tests, no new violations, full restitution paid, treatment completed, and every review hearing attended on time, I will consider ending supervision 6 months early and converting the final 10 days of suspended jail exposure into additional community service. That was the door in the order. I could not say belief from the bench the way a father or a friend can say it. I could build a benchmark that carried it. I want to stop here for just a moment, not for effect, because what I just said is still the part of the case that sits in me most heavily, and I need a second with it. Subscribe while I take that second. Subscribe and stay. Okay, let me keep going. After I imposed sentence, I spoke directly to Emma. I remember those words because I had worked on them in my head for days and then changed them when I saw both women in the same room. I said, you drove drunk. You hit a car carrying a mother and a child who were doing nothing wrong. Then when this court gave you rules to protect the public while your case was pending, you treated those rules like something you could game. Then I turned toward Marisol without fully leaving Emma behind. I said, what happened to you was not a minor inconvenience. It was a hand laid across the shape of your ordinary life, and it changed how your daughter now looks at red lights. That was the sorrow current, plain and named. It needed naming. Then I looked back at Emma and said, you are not only the worst thing you did on Westheimer Road, but you are fully responsible for it, and from this day forward you do not get to separate those two truths. That was the grace current as far as I could responsibly take it from the bench, not softness, not escape, just truth held whole. Then I addressed the room. I said, a courtroom is one of the few places left where we are still required to look at harm and possibility in the same light. Nobody moved when I said that. Even the paper in the clerk's hand stayed still. I ended with one last sentence that was addressed to no one person. I said, a person can be dangerous and still be reachable, but only if everybody in the room refuses to lie about either part. That is how I finished. You just heard what I said in that courtroom. I want you to hold that. Subscribe before we go further, because what happened after I said it is the part of this case I have thought about the most. Subscribe now. When the hearing ended and the courtroom began to empty, I stayed seated for a moment the way I often do. From the bench, I watched Marisol stand, smooth the front of her blouse, and then turn slightly toward Sophia's grandmother before stepping into the aisle. Emma had been taken to the side door by then. As Marisol passed the second row, I heard her say softly to her husband, I can breathe now, but I still need time. That was both rivers in one sentence. Before I stood up, I placed my hand flat on the top page of the file and left it there until my breathing matched the room again. That was all. No speech, no private ceremony, just a hand on paper. Sometimes that is the only honest action available. What happened after is one reason I am telling this now. On October 12, 2025, Marisol came back to my court on an unrelated matter as a witness in someone else's case, and she stopped after the docket ended to tell me something. She said Emma had completed every hospital service shift assigned to her, had not missed a single test in 7 months, and had chosen to work her final 2 shifts in the pediatric transport wing. Then Marisol said, I still do not trust her, but I no longer think she is hiding. Both currents were still there. They had simply learned how to stand in the same sentence. There was an appeal. Emma challenged the bond revocation findings and later challenged parts of the sentence in the First Court of Appeals of Texas. On March 18, 2026, That court affirmed the result in plain terms. The record showed repeated violations, the court had room to act, and the sentence stayed in place. It took a little over a year from the night of the crash for the paper trail to close its loop. When I heard the appeal had been denied, I felt steadier, not happy. That is the truest way I can say it. This case showed me something I am still working out. I had always known the law asks for judgment. I had not fully understood, until this case, how often judgment asks for two honest feelings to remain alive at the same time, not one after the other, not one hidden under the other, together. I have seen many people come before me with alcohol in the file and excuses in the mouth. I have seen families come in carrying receipts, neck braces, silence, rage, prayers, and the thin patience that only comes after a long bad night. What I had not said in any professional setting before this is this: some of the best rulings I have ever made were the ones that left me a little sad after I made them. That sadness was not doubt. It was proof I had not gone numb. If you are listening to this as someone who knows the sorrow current of this story from the inside, maybe because you have sat at a light and done everything right and still had somebody else's choice come through your evening like broken glass, I want to say one thing carefully. I saw in Marisol's face that day the effort it takes not to let fear become your whole posture. I also saw something else. Over the course of those proceedings, the harm done to her did not erase her ability to choose the kind of person she wanted to be in response. And if you are listening as someone who sees yourself uncomfortably in Emma's chair, maybe because you made a real choice that hurt real people, and now you wake up each day with the hard question of what comes next, let me tell you what I have seen from that bench. The people who move toward a different life are not the ones with the cleverest words. They are the ones who stop spending energy on being misunderstood and start spending it on being accountable. What I wish I could say to every person in that chair is simple. The truth you are avoiding is almost always smaller than the life it can return to you. Now I want to go back to the sentence that met me in the hallway after all of this was over. Marisol stood there with one hand on her purse strap and said, "Thank you for making the order big enough to stop her and small enough to leave her a way back." She said it quietly. She meant every word. That is why I told you this story. Subscribe and stay. Leave something honest in the comments if you are the kind of person who knows two hard feelings can share one room without canceling each other out.